Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Wendy. I've decided to kick off my new knitting channel with a sock pattern. There are 3 reasons that you should make these socks. First of all, they fit beautifully. Who doesn't like a comfy pair of homemade knit socks? Secondly, they are uncomplicated to make. I've tried to make the pattern as straightforward as possible. There's no fancy cast on or tricky heel shaping. It's simple enough for a beginner to make, it's easy to memorize, and it's reliable enough that an expert will keep coming back to this pattern. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, it's a universal design. I made these 3 socks, one for a 3-year-old, one for an adult woman's foot, and the last one for an extra large man's foot, all using the same pattern. You are probably thinking, she's crazy, but stick with me and I'll show you how it's done. I encourage you to try making a pair for yourself, and if you like the design, you can find a link to the downloadable pattern below and make more cozy socks for your family and friends. There's going to be a good several minutes of explaining at the beginning of the video so that you understand the sock construction. But once you know that, you'll be able to successfully complete a sock for anyone you would like to knit for. So please bear with me, it will be worth it. Here we go. The first step in creating this custom sock pattern is to measure your foot or the foot of the person you're making the sock for. So put a piece of paper against a wall, making sure it doesn't tuck under the baseboard. Tape it down if you need to. And then putting your heel against the wall, mark the longest part of your foot. Then using a measuring tape and standing on it, wrap it around the widest part of your foot, so the ball of your foot, to measure the circumference. It's important to stand on it because your foot does spread out a little bit when you put weight on it. Now we need to do some calculations to make the sock custom fit. So starting with that length measurement, I'll put the measuring tape at the mark of my toe and measure to the bottom edge of the paper to get the total length of the foot. In my case, I have big feet, so that is 10 inches long. The circumference measurement, I got 9 inches. So you would put in whatever 2 numbers you got in those 2 boxes, and I have a nice chart in the pattern to help you plan this out. Next, we have to figure out the gauge. And in order to do that, we need a gauge swatch. This pattern is designed to be done with 2 circular needles. So I have my 2 short sock needles here. There's a couple of advantages to using 2 circulars. I find with double pointed, I tend to drop them and they're just harder to manage. So if you don't like double pointed needles, these are easier to use. But you can do this pattern with double pointed needles if that's your preference. Secondly, if you use 2 needles, the length of your cord is not so important. You can make any size of sock with 2 needles and it will work. You don't have to have exactly the right size of needle to go around your sock. And I'll show you in a moment how we're going to set that up and put the stitches on the 2 needles to go around and around the sock. But first we need to make a gauge swatch. And this will show you how you can work with 1 circular needle going back and forth if you've never done this before. So when you're working on a circular needle, going across on a straight piece like this, or even on a sock, going around and around, the idea is to use it on both ends. So I'm going to take, you can see my circle here, I'm going to knit off of the left hand needle onto the right hand needle, which is at the other end of the same circular needle. So for making your gauge swatch, just knit across as normal. Not everybody likes making a gauge swatch. And if you were to ask me, do I need a gauge swatch for this pattern? My answer would be only if you want your socks to fit well. It's definitely worth taking the time, and in fact, it's essential to do the calculations for this pattern. So make a gauge swatch that's 5 or 6 inches wide and several inches long. It doesn't matter so much how long it is. We just want to know how many stitches you get per inch so that it fits around the foot properly. When you get to the end of the row with the circular needle, simply turn it around, pick up the other end of the needle, and purl your way back. If you've never worked with circular needles before, by the time you get this swatch done, you will get more comfortable with holding two ends of the circular and working that way. When your gauge swatch is done, take it off of the needle to measure and flatten it out. I've got mine pinned to a cork trivet here. Pin it out so it's nice and flat and slightly stretched because it tends to pull in, but not so stretched, just so your stitches are nice and even. Then put a couple of pins 4 inches apart. So I've marked here and here, and count how many stitches you have between those two markers. Okay, so counting across, I have 26 stitches between the two markers. So over 4 inches, I've created 26 stitches. That's my gauge. We'll use that number in our calculations to custom fit the sock. So as we just saw, I have 26 stitches over 4 inches for my gauge. My needle size is a 2.5 millimeter needle, and the yarn that I'm using is Patton's Croy Socks. This is a superfine or #1 weight yarn. It doesn't really matter which yarn you use. It should be a sock yarn with wool and nylon if you want them to be durable. However, you can use any weight to make any size of sock. The important thing is you have to know your gauge, and your needles should be appropriate to the type of yarn that you're using. So this one calls for a 2.75. I'm using a 2.5, which is slightly smaller, going a little smaller than the suggested size on the package for socks works well because it's a bit of a denser stitch. We will get to knitting these socks very soon, but knowing the information to make them fit well is really important. So there are a couple more calculations we need to do. So I have figured out that my gauge is 26 over 4 inches. So to figure out how many stitches per inch, of course I'm going to divide 26 by 4. That gives me 6.5 stitches per inch. You can work in centimeters too if you want to, it doesn't really matter. Now, if I multiply that by the circumference of my foot, so 6.5 times 9, I will know how many stitches I need to go around my foot. So multiply 6.5 times 9, or whatever your gauge is, so G times C, I get 58.5 stitches. I need to take that number and round it down to the nearest multiple of 4 because I need a multiple of 4 for this pattern. So 56 stitches is the nearest multiple of 4. If I divide 56 by 4, I get a whole number, which is 14. Okay, so my base number of stitches, this is the part between the toe increases and the increases for the instep. So the middle part of the foot, the base number of stitches is going to be 56 around. To increase for the instep, I want to multiply by 1.25 for an average foot. If you have an extra wide instep, multiply it by 1.3. So 56 times 1.25, or 125% would be another way to say it, is 70. This number also needs to be rounded down to the nearest multiple of 4 for the pattern to work. So in this case, the nearest multiple of 4 is 68 stitches. 68 divided by 4 again gives me a whole number. So for the widest part of my foot, just before the heel, I need to increase to 68 stitches. And the last piece of information I need is where to start those increases. Generally, you'll start the increases at 50% of the length of the foot. So my length of foot is 10 inches. 50% would be 10 times 0.5 or 5 inches. That's where I'm going to start my increases. But that 50% calculation is on the foot length. Overall, my sock is going to be a little shorter than the length of foot because it stretches. So I'm about 10% shorter. I'm at 9 inches instead of 10 inches for the finished length of the sock. Those are all the numbers you need to make this sock custom sized for any person's foot. Finally, we get to the knitting. As you've probably already figured out, this is a toe up sock. So we're going to start with the toe and work our way up to the top of the cuff. The big advantage of that is it allows you to make the best use of your yarn. If you have only a limited amount, you know that you can just continue the cuff until you run out of yarn, and you don't have to worry about starting top down and leaving enough to make it to the toe. This toe has no seam. We're going to cast on with almost an invisible seam at the toe. Don't panic, I've got a simple way to do that. And it starts by tying a weight onto the leading edge of the yarn. I know, looks weird, but the reason will become apparent very soon. To cast on, pick up both of your needles, so an end of each one, holding them together, pointing away from you. Then put the yarn in between the needles with the weight close to your body and hold on to it like this. Just clamp your thumb down on it. Okay? Now we're simply going to wrap the yarn on the right needle and then the left needle, like so. Around the back, into the center. And now the left one, around the back, into the center. Around the right hand one, into the center. Left hand one, that's 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, around, 5 in the center, 6, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, ending with the bottom one. You can double check if you want, but I'll have 10 on each side, wrapping them pretty close together like that. All right, now point them to 3 o'clock and turn them over. you will see that the yarn is coming out from around the bottom needle. Okay? The weight is so that I don't accidentally lose this last stitch here. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 on the top, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 on the bottom. You can use more, like 12 or 14 if it's for a very large sock, or go down to 6 or 8 stitches for the toe of a small sock, but 10 is a good starting point and will work for most people. Now, hanging on to the top stitches, or all the stitches actually, grab the bottom needle and pull it out so that those stitches are resting on the cable. We're going to work on the top needle. So just like I showed you, take the other end of that same needle, okay? So I'm working off of one end of the needle and putting the stitches back onto the other end of the same needle. And I'm going to work in the back loop on this side. After this, we'll work in the front, but for this casting on row, work in the back loop. So insert your hook under the back leg of that first stitch, wrap the yarn around, and knit. Again, in the back leg of the second one, wrap the yarn around and pull it off. You will notice that this first row gets looser as you go. You can see the stitches are getting farther apart. Don't worry, just trust the process. It will straighten itself out in the second half of the row. Wrap around and stitch each of those 10 stitches off of the left hand end of the needle onto the right hand end. Like I said, it will get kind of loose and sloppy, but after the last one, you can tighten it up. There we go. So now you see partly why I had that weight on there, so I didn't lose that stitch. It's just going to snug it up a little bit. Pull those last couple stitches. Not too much. It's okay if they're kind of loose in the middle. So that first side is done. Turn clockwise. Now we're going to work on the other needle. So the one that I just did, I'm going to pull the stitches to the center of the cable. Untangle my yarn here. There we go. So the yarn will still be coming out from between the cables. Now we're going to work on this side. And we are on the outside of the sock at the moment. Okay. Now I'm working the other side of the toe onto the other end of that same needle. Now working in the front of the stitches. Snug it up a bit if it's getting loose on you. Here, I'm going to get my thumb out of there so you can see. So, working in the front of this stitch, wrap around, take the stitch off. Next one. If you can do this toe part, this first row, you will be fine with the rest of the sock. This is kind of the awkward part. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, now when I pull them apart, here I'm going to put the two needles side by side so you can see. When I pull them apart, you can see that they're nicely joined together. It looks like a row of knitting in between. If you're not sure how I did that, back up the video until the beginning of the cast on and have another look. Okay, so I can cut off this this weight now. It was just to kind of keep that end from pulling through. My working yarn is here. Okay, it's on the left hand side. So I know that I need to go around to this side to do my next row. There's my working yarn. There's my top needle. Take the other end of the same needle. Continue working in the round on the 2 needles, 1 needle at a time, working half of the stitches onto the other end of the same needle, so this half, and then switching around and working the other half onto the other end of that same needle, going around and around. For round 2, I'm going to increase, and I'm going to increase for every other round for the toe. And I'm going to increase in the second stitch as follows. So knit the first stitch, and my increase is the same every time. Again, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So to increase, stitch or knit in the next stitch. Then we're going to knit again into that stitch. We're going to do that by picking up the left leg of that stitch that I just worked from the back, okay? So this one that I just worked into, pick it up from the back, bring your needle around and into that stitch. You'll see it gets a twist in it when you do that, and knit it again, like that. So my 2 stitches have turned into 3. Knit across to the second last stitch. In the second last stitch, we're going to do the same thing. Knit it, pick up the left leg from the back, and knit into that stitch again. Every increase will be done in that same way. Knit the last stitch. Pull that needle through, turn clockwise, push the top needle over so that the stitches are on the needle. Take the other end of the same needle, and again, this is still round 2, so knit 1, pull that first stitch quite snug on the first couple of rounds so that the stitches don't get too loose. Knit in the second stitch, pick it up from the back, knit into it again for your increase. Knit across to the second last stitch. Increase in that second last stitch. So knit the stitch, pick up the left leg from the back, stitch into it again, then knit into the last stitch. So I have 2 stitches increased on each side, and I'm at the end of the row. I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit, that last stitch there. There we go. Now, I want to keep track of which is the end of the row here. So I could put a stitch marker right there, and that will tell me that that is the beginning and end of the round. Now that round is done, so pull that stitch through, or that needle through, turn clockwise, and start round 3. Round 3 is just a regular knit round. Again, working off the left-hand end of the needle and onto the right hand end. Knit across, pulling that first couple of stitches quite snug because we want to turn the toe. Pull it through onto the cable, turn clockwise, do the second half of round 3. Again, just knitting across onto the other end of the same needle and pulling the first stitch snug. The stitch marker tells me that's the end of that round. Pull that needle through onto the cable, turn it clockwise, and round 4 is going to be another increase round. I'm going to keep increasing on the even rounds, so 4, 6, 8, and so on, until I get to the number of stitches that I determined as B, the base number. So in my case, that's 56. Knit the first stitch, increase in the second stitch. Pick up the left leg from the back, knit into the front. I'll make sure to zoom in nice and close so you can see what's going on with this thin yarn. Increase in the second last stitch, so knit the stitch, pick up the left leg, go back around to the front of it and knit it again. That's 2 stitches increased on that side in the second and the second last stitch. Turn clockwise, do the same thing in the second half of round 4. The first few rows are the awkward ones. After that, it gets a little smoother. So just persevere or start over if you need to, doesn't matter. Knit into the first stitch, increase in the second one, increase in the second last one in the same manner, knit the stitch, pick up the leg, knit into the front again. I just find this is better for not leaving gaps. You could knit front and back if you want, but I think this method is a little less visible. Okay, so that's round 4 done. I am going to continue increasing every other round until I have a total of 56 stitches all the way around, so 28 on each side. So if you're working along with me, just increase to the number that you decided was your base number, and then join me at the end of the toe increases. All right, so I've repeated those 2 rounds, rounds 2 and 3, an increase and a plain knit round, until I reached the number that I calculated for the base number of stitches, which was my gauge per inch times the circumference of the foot. So I have 28 stitches on each side, If you find that you've lost one along the way and you only have 27 on one side and 28 on the other, it's not a big deal. Just make it up on the next round. You'll never see it. So there's the toe and the toe shaping on the sides. Now I will continue just working straight around and around on the two circular needles until I reach the 50% of the total foot length. So in my case that was 5 inches, so I'm going to work until this piece is 5 inches long, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the increases for the instep, for the upper part of your foot as you're getting close to the ankle, so that there's a little more room there before we start the heel. If you find that it's not as neat as you would like, maybe there's some gapping or the cast on didn't come out as tidy as you'd like, just go back and try it again. It will come easier the second time, and then come and join me when you've got halfway up the length of the foot. I hope that you're enjoying this project so far and that you are finding it easy to follow along. My sock is 5 inches long, which is 50% of the foot length, so that's what I was going for. Now I'm ready to start the increases for the instep. So looking at the sock, this is going to be the top side, and this is going to be the bottom side with the heel. I'm going to take my stitch marker off and move it up here so that I remember that this is the top side of the sock. All of my increases are going to be done on this top side needle. I'm not going to increase on the bottom side. The increases will look the same as we did for the toe. So I'm going to increase in the second stitch and the second last stitch. Then I'm going to do 2 knit rows and then another increase row. So it's a 3-row repeat. Increase round, knit round, knit round. Increase round, knit round, and knit round. There are different ways to keep track of that. You can do whatever way works for you. I simply have made a little grid here. So after I finish my increase round, I'll just put a little mark in that box and then mark my knit rounds in the same way. And I've got it laid out here that each increase round goes up by 2. So starting at 56, the next round will be 58. 3 rounds after that will be 60, then 62, and so on up to 68, which is my total increase that I figured on my paper earlier on. So again, working off of the same needle and onto the same needle. Knit 1, knit into the second one, pick up the back leg of that stitch, knit it again. All the increases are done the same for simplicity's sake. In the second last stitch, same thing, knit, pick up from the back, and knit it again. So that's my first increase, 2 stitches on the top side, turn it around, and work the back needle, just knitting across. That's the first round complete. I'll mark it on my chart and then do 2 knit rounds and then repeat the sequence. When I have finished all of the increases, I'll come back and we'll start the heel. My instep increases are finished, so I have a total of 68 stitches going around. And for the next step, we're going to start the heel shaping. So I've knitted across the front needle, and I'm ready to turn to the back. All of the heel stitches will be worked on this back needle. We're just going to work back and forth on these 28 stitches, or whatever number you have for your sock. There are many different ways to make a heel, but again, I'm going with the keep it simple principle. And we are simply going to knit across until we get to the last stitch. So leaving the last stitch on the left hand needle, what I'm going to do before turning is to stitch into the stitch that's below the one on the hook. So into the knit stitch below, put the yarn around, pull that stitch back, and set it on that left hand needle. So what I have here is, it looks like 2 stitches coming out of the 1 stitch below. So there's a pair now on my left hand needle. Then I'm going to turn around and purl my way back to the last stitch again. With 1 stitch left on the purl row, I'm going to do something similar. Instead of inserting my needle into the stitch as I normally would, I'm going to insert it 1 stitch below, wrap that one to purl, pull it back through, and set it on the left hand needle. So now I have a pair there. Turn around and go back. Put these other needles in there, get them out of the way. At the end of that row, I'm going to stop at the second last stitch, so the one before the pair, and again stitch into the knit stitch that's below the one on the hook. So that one right there, not this one, but go underneath into the one below it. Knit that one, but don't take it off the needle, just set the new one beside the one on the left hand needle. So now I have 2 pairs, and again you can see it looks like there are 2 knit stitches coming out of that 1 stitch below. This will help to keep the heel tight and there's no gaps doing it this way. Turn around and go back. And in the same way, I'm going to stop 1 stitch before the paired stitch and work below that one and turn, and then go back to the knit side and do the same thing. And I'm going to keep going back and forth, stopping 1 stitch before the paired stitch and working underneath it to make a new paired stitch. And I'm going to keep going back and forth that way until I have only 10 stitches left in the middle, in between, which is the same as what I had for the toe when I cast on at the beginning. So coming up to the end of the row, there's my paired stitch. I stop in the one beside it, work underneath, put that stitch next to it. So now I have 2 pairs on each side. Working back until I get to the last stitch before the paired stitches again. Again, at the end of the knit row, I'll pair the last knit stitch, and now I have 3 pairs. turn around, and go back to the last purl stitch that isn't paired and pair that one. Going back and forth, continuing in that manner until I have only 10 unpaired stitches in the middle. I've created all of my pairs and I have my 10 unworked or unpaired stitches in the middle. Your numbers may be different depending on how many stitches you calculated for your circumference, but the important thing is that your unpaired number of stitches in the middle equal what you did for casting on at the toe. That should make it fit well, and you'll have equal numbers of paired stitches on either side. In my case, it's 9, 10 unpaired, and 9 more paired. Now, to get back to my regular round and round on the sock, all I need to do is knit around, turning each of those pairs back into one stitch by knitting them together. So when I get to the pair, I'll just put my needle through both of those and work them off together like that. Put it into both, make a knit stitch, and pull them off. And I'll just continue like that across the rest of these pairs. Knit around the front and then knit the pairs on the other side, working all the way across the back. So I'll join you when I have all of my pairs worked off and knit back into one stitch, and that will bring me back to the 28 stitches that I started with on this needle. So at the end of that row, turn around, knit across the front of the sock. At the end of the front needle, turn around and knit across the back, turning each of these pairs back into one stitch. Make sure I pick up the right one. And there's the heel, all done. Couldn't be any simpler. Now we'll turn around to the front of the sock again. And while I've gotten back to 28 stitches on the back needle, I still have all my increases on the front needle or the top needle. And I need to now start decreasing for the top part of the ankle before the cuff. And to do that, it's just going to be the opposite of what we did before. So I'm going to decrease on the next round, then knit 2 rounds, decrease on the following round, knit 2 rounds, decrease on the following round, until I come down to the matching number of stitches to the back. So back to where I started before I started increasing, which is 28 on this needle and 28 on this needle. Now decreasing looks like this. Knit the first stitch. And now I'll zoom in a bit so you can see this better. Now we're going to do a slip, slip, knit. And I like to do mine by slipping the first stitch knitwise. So put your needle in on the left hand side of the leg, slide it off of the needle like that, and slip the next one purlwise. So pick it up from the back and slide it off the needle like so. Now take the left hand needle, put it back into those stitches, leaving the right one in, wrap to knit, and knit them together like so. That will make a decrease that leans toward the center of the sock. So those second and third stitches get slip, slip, knit together. Now I'm going to knit to the third last stitch in the row, and I'll stitch those two together as well to make a second decrease on this side. With 3 stitches left on my left hand needle, I'm going to make a right leaning decrease by knitting these two together. And the abbreviation for this is K2TOG, knit 2 together. So put your needle into the left hand of the 2 stitches, through both of them, like so. I'll show you again. So into the left, go through the middle of both, wrap your yarn, and take both of those off the needle at the same time. That turns those 2 stitches into 1 stitch, and now I've done a decrease on either side. And as I mentioned before, I'll make another little chart like I did with my increases, and knit 2 rows around between each decrease row. All right, nearly there. Just the ribbing left to do. Of course, you can do a longer stockinette section if you wish before you get to the ribbing, but I would recommend at least 3 inches of ribbing so that your socks will stay up. When you have a multiple of 4, like we do on this sock, you can do a 2x2 ribbing. So 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, all the way around, making sure that on the next round your purls and knits all line up. If they don't, you've lost track somewhere, or you don't have a multiple of 4 stitches. So 2 knits, 1, 2, bring the yarn around to the front, 2 purls, put the yarn to the back, 2 knits, bring it to the front, 2 purls. And continue in that manner all the way around, making the cuff as long as you would like it to be. And when this one matches the other one, I will come back and I'll show you how to do the cast off so that it's got a little bit of extra stretch. I hope that you're enjoying this project and that your socks are coming along really well. My ribbing is finished and I'm ready to show you how to do the casting off. As I mentioned, this cast off for this sock has a little extra stretch because some people have the issue that when they cast off, it's too tight at the top edge and it makes your sock uncomfortable, which you definitely don't want. So this method adds an extra stitch after every 2 cast off stitches. And I'm going to cast off in pattern and then add in that extra stitch. And it looks like this. So of course my first 2 stitches are knit, the next 2 are purl, and so on. So I am going to knit the first stitch and the second stitch, then put my needle under the first one, lift it over the second one, and off the needle. So the first one has been cast off, the second one's still on the needle. And after this stitch, I'm going to add in an extra little room by doing a yarn over and lift the stitch and put it over that yarn over. So it's like a little chain stitch in between every rib here. Then I'm going to knit the next rib. Sorry, I'm going to purl the next rib because it's a purl stitch. Bring the yarn to the front, purl, lift the first one over, purl the next one, and lift the first one over. Then put the yarn over the needle in front of that stitch. You can do it this way or you can wrap it around. Doesn't matter, just needs to go over. and lift that one over. So after every 2 stitches, I incorporate that extra little yarn over. So knit, lift one over, knit, lift one over, yarn over, lift one over. Now the next 2, purl, lift one over, purl, lift one over, yarn over, lift one over. So every 2 stitches, incorporate that extra yarn over to give you a little extra room in your bind off. So I'm just going to continue like that the rest of the way around, and then cut the yarn and work it in, and then I'll show you the finished socks. When the bind off is complete, just cut the yarn and pull it through the last stitch and weave it securely on the inside, and your socks are ready to wear. The complete detailed written pattern is available for purchase. You can find the links in the description below. And if you would prefer to make socks on 2 straight needles, I'll be modifying this pattern and making another video soon. So look for that in the next few weeks. I hope that you enjoyed this project. If you would like to see more of my knitting videos, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. I really appreciate you joining me. Have a great day.